Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Strength Game Podcast. I'm your host, Nick O'Brien, and this is episode number 117. The Strength Game is a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things physical culture with the coaches, athletes, iron enthusiasts, and experts deeply embedded in the strength game on both sides of the profession, both as coaches and as competitive athletes. I want to thank everyone who has liked, shared, commented, has provided us feedback, future guests. All your support allows us to continue to bring on expert guests and highlight more individuals in the strength game, just like our guest today. Also want to thank our sponsors. Family owned and operated since 1976, Samson Equipment has been specializing in full turnkey weight room build-outs from planning to installation. Based in Las Cruces, New Mexico, Samson provides professional weight room solutions for all those looking to lead the way in advancing our strength and conditioning profession. Coaches have relied on Samson as their top resource for all their weight room renovations because they provide the finest materials and design, product customization, and the most reputable customer service in the business. If you're in the market for elite level strength equipment, weight room renovations, or upgrades, be sure to check out samsonequipment.com and see how Samson has been delivering clients a long-lasting yet affordable product for over 4 decades. Also want to thank our sponsor, Cerberus Strength. Owned and operated by active lifters, Cerberus is trusted by the top strength sport athletes and lifters in the world. Cerberus's wide range of products are made by athletes for athletes, truly living up to its moniker, made by the strong for the strong. From sandbags, training gear and supplements, to lifting gear, knee sleeves, and much more, Cerberus Strength provides the highest quality strength products on the market, designed and manufactured to help you defeat, destroy, and devour your competition. So if you're in the market for the highest quality strength conditioning gear and equipment, be sure to use promo code STRENGTH_game at checkout to receive 10% off your next order at CerberusStrength.com. Also want to thank our sponsor, Sport Kilt. Taking the traditional kilt concept, Sport Kilt crafted a casual kilt using modern materials that is perfect for Highland athletes and casual kilt aficionados alike. Sport Kilt offers an option for people looking for a tartan that is less expensive, comfortable, lighter, and durable, yet machine washable. So whether you're competing in Highland Games, connecting with your heritage at a family gathering or wedding, or just casually spending some time around the house or wanting to stand out from the crowd, sport kilts are made for everyone and for every occasion. Make the ultimate Celtic statement by checking out the full selection at sportkilt.com and be sure to use promo code TSG to save at checkout. And in this week's episode, I am joined by Ron Dickson. Ron is the Assistant Athletic Director for Strength and Conditioning for Olympic Sports at Virginia Tech. At Tech, he directly oversees the department as well as design and implements strength and conditioning programs for men's soccer, women's lacrosse, and men's golf. Previously, Dickson spent 5 years at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, where in addition to his coaching duties, he was in charge of the nutrition and sleep student athlete education program and directed the athletic performance internship program. Prior to that, he served as a strength conditioning coach at Wofford College during the 2012 to 2013 academic year. Dickson began his career as a graduate assistant coach at Emory University. From there, he went on to become an assistant strength coach at Merrimack College for 1 year. Outside of coaching, Dickson has also been an adjunct professor at multiple schools, teaching everything from energy system development to anatomy, physiology courses, to clinical exercise prescription and intro to athletic performance classes. A former 4-year letterman for the University of West Georgia football team, Dickson continues to train and has been participating in endurance races as of late, most recently completing his first marathon. Like I said, I'm excited to have him on the show today. So with all that said, let's get in the game with Coach Ron Dickson. What's going on, everybody? Today, I've got my good friend, Coach Ron Dickson, on the show. How you doing today, man?
Doing great. How are you doing?
I'm good. Hey, we've been going back and forth for a while, and we met a long time ago and actually got to meet each other and like reintroduce each other a couple spots as I've kind of changed, and you're always kind of popping into town when I'm at a different place. So I'm excited to finally get you on the show today, man, and kind of and catch up and make sure everybody kind of knows what you're doing over there at VT.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be on the podcast. Grateful for the opportunity and thanks for putting on this podcast. I've listened to several of them and a lot of good information with a lot of, high level performance coaches out there that you've had on the podcast. So, I'm excited to share some experiences, maybe a couple of mistakes and probably a lot of lessons learned as well.
That's perfect. Well, I'm glad to get you on and make sure that you kind of join that list of great coaches we've had on. So, hey, man, without any further ado, let's kind of hop right into how you got involved in lifting and the strength game, and what also like nowadays kind of prompted you to get started in marathon running as well.
Ooh, let's not lose the listeners yet. Talking about endurance training and on the strength podcast here, the strength game podcast. Began in high school, so as a ninth grader, at the school I was at, you're playing football, you get put into some sort of strength and conditioning program, and I noticed really quickly that in order for me to have a successful high school career, I was going to need to get stronger and add some mass. So it started as like, hey, you're going to do this because you're playing football. I grew to love weights eventually, or as part of the process. You start getting stronger, you start feeling better about yourself, you start seeing the things you're doing in the weight room impact your performance, whether it be football, baseball, basketball, really any sport at that level, in any level for that matter. I also had a couple good mentors. Cam Pettis, Kelby Watts, who were my strength coaches in high school, were kind of ahead of their time as far as strength and conditioning practitioners. And uh, I had a lot of really good coaches who were mentors, and and that's kind of how it got started.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, to see the impact that you kind of have from a high school setting too, and even remember those names, I couldn't tell you who or how, like what I knew what I was doing in high school was just not right. It was definitely like whatever, probably a football coach or probably someone else that was just kind of around at that time and just that was their second or third kind of duty in high school. But for you to like really get impacted by that and then obviously like you tied it into like sports performance at that point in time and realized that the weight room was a conduit to make you better on the field. But to have like mentors like that early on, that must have helped you kind of take that career and like take that athleticism and also kind of move on as you went on to college. Like how did that transition like from high school and kind of that love for training start to impact you as you got into college and then kind of move on past that when you started picking up coaching?
Uh, I think it just continued throughout college, right? Once you get to college, you're around people who are even stronger and more athletic, and so you got to continue to develop physiologically. I had a pretty good base coming out of high school, I thought, but even when I got to college, like, all right, I need to put a couple more pounds on, and those guys are a little bit faster than what I'm used to. It was just a continuation of that, and I had some really good, college strength and conditioning coaches as well. Drew Kramer. Uh, to name one. As you suggested just a minute ago, I can't remember them all, so I drew a blank on the other one. But a really influential strength coach who I still keep in contact with now was my college strength and conditioning coach.
That's awesome. Yeah, to still be in contact with someone like that. I mean, they've got to be a huge influence as you like on like athleticism and kind of being a part of the program as you're like competing. And then obviously like you're at that age in college where you're trying to figure everything out and to be gravitated towards the weight room and have someone in there to kind of show you the ropes is huge. I mean, even when you had that in high school, when did it kind of solidify? When was coaching kind of on your radar, or was that already like in the back of your mind as you started stepping into like college and still continuing to play football throughout?
Yeah, so coaching had been on my mind in general since high school because I had, again, I had good mentors who were strength coaches, but also who had good mentors who were sport coaches. So I was kind of torn, like, hey, do I want to go be a football coach? Do I want to be a strength and conditioning coach, and my undergraduate degree was in physical education and health, with the idea that I was going to go be a high school football coach. And then, I really enjoyed strength and conditioning in high school. In college, it just, the love continued and grew. And then by the time I finished with college, I was like, you know what, like, I think I want to explore the strength and conditioning field a little bit farther, or a little bit more. And then that's where, not to get ahead of myself, but I was exploring different graduate programs, and I visited Georgia State, met with some of the academic people, and while I was there, we were just talking about, hey, what this looks like, what does it look like money wise, and what does it look like a lot of different ways, and what are some other opportunities for me to get my graduate degree, maybe as a GA in different capacities. And they're like, well, we have a system with Emory University where we'll actually, Emory University will pay a tuition at Georgia State, and they'll also pay you a stipend to be a street coach for them, because Emory University did not have an exercise science department. So any kind of GAs they had in the athletic department were pulled from different colleges that were local to them. So that's, I got lucky and kind of fell into that position. And then, the rest is history from there.
That's cool. I didn't realize that Emory was one of those universities. I know there's a couple around the country too that I've heard of. Like, I'm pretty sure, I know you've been at Merrimack too, and Merrimack
Mm-hmm.
seems like one of the ones where they kind of outsource and have GAs that kind of float around that area as well. And I'm all the GAs, or like quote unquote GAs, like at Stanford, I think we're going to San Jose State or one of the other state schools up there to actually like commute and do their courses online, but still be able to go like to a high level university and like shadow, but still go back to kind of their home one. So that's definitely like a great opportunity to kind of get experience at both and make sure that at the same time, like you're in the classroom learning everything you need to, but you're also can get out on the floor, get those coaching hours, and really kind of find ways to apply the stuff that you're learning. Like throughout your career, like moving on from there and like getting on to like taking on assistant roles like in multiple places like Merrimack and Wofford, and then like Chattanooga, like along the way, what were kind of like the important things that you kind of felt like you picked up on as you got to like that full-time role that maybe you just weren't necessarily accustomed to or didn't have to really deal with, and when you were still in grad school or still kind of like learning the ropes in the very beginning?
Yeah. I think, first off, I had a lot of patient mentors along the way because I did make a ton of mistakes. Um, Backing up a little bit, and I kind of mentioned this of visiting Georgia State. If there was any advice I could give anyone, it would be to go see people in person. An application, a resume, find a way to get to see people in person, take initiative. And if I didn't ever visit Georgia State, and if I didn't, reach out to the dean and say, hey, can I ask you, can I have 5 minutes of your time to ask you questions about your graduate programs within the exercise science department, I may have never had that opportunity. So, get out there and get face to face with people, take initiative. Back to your question, again, I think that my journey has been failing forward a lot, right? And, sometimes my ego, sometimes my, sometimes my competitive nature, a lot of things that can make us get motivate us and make us great can also hinder us. Early on, I probably thought I knew more than I did. Early on, again, I had a lot of patient mentors, Mike Kamal at Merrimack, at Emory, Steve Lewis. Grateful that Todd Riddle gave me a chance at Wofford. And then Scott Brinks at Chattanooga, who's now at Richmond. Like, they were all like patient at times. They were honest with me, but they were also patient and allowed me to, to really, I was lucky to have them because I was hard headed and stubborn and, thought I knew a little more than I did. And really, I think you need to be self-aware. You need to be honest with yourself. You need to be humble, and, you need to be, you need to have a growth mindset. And I know that probably a lot of people say those kind of things, but to practice those things, especially sometimes with some of the personalities that you get with people who have been in college athletics or competitive people in general, sometimes those characteristics aren't on the forefront of who they are as people. So you got to be, very cognitive of that, or cognizant of that, and practice it, right? Practice being humble, practice, even if you think you're right, like look at a different perspective, or be willing to listen to the other side of things. um, and then, yeah, being honest with yourself. Like you need to be confident, but you also can't think that you are where you're not, or think you are something you're not. And ask other people. I know it's tough to ask for feedback, but the way that you intend to be perceived and the way that you are perceived are oftentimes two very different things, especially early in my career. And I thought, early in my career I had pretty good intentions, but I probably was perceived, you know, in ways that I didn't want to be a lot earlier in my career.
Yeah, I think a lot of coaches young in their career kind of fall victim to that, where you want to exude confidence and like you feel like you kind of know what you're talking about, and you just don't know all the nuances. You only have the experience you have, and you can't really speed up the process when you have like great mentors, and you have like some of the ones that you're talking about, like at all your stops early in your career. You forget a lot of times that they've been doing that job for 15, 10, 15, 20 years. And as soon as you kind of lead a program, or you take a warm up, or you kind of get through a season, or whatever it is, like you feel like you understand everything that's going on. Like you feel like you could do it. And it's not, there's no consistency to it yet. Like you haven't been there more than just kind of going through day by day by day, and they've got year by year by year. So it's great to have the confidence and everything, but there's a dichotomy to it where you can't be so confident that you're cocky, and there's a dichotomy with it that like you need to have a growth mindset, but you also need to be like really self-aware of your faults too, and be willing
100%.
to kind of grow. So all great things for, I mean, even young coaches, but like all like seasoned coaches alike too. Like there's still a lot that needs to be going on within your career where you're still advancing, because I mean, we see the kind of landscape of what's going on in college athletics, professional athletics, everything. Like it's ever changing and ever moving, that you can't just kind of rely on the status quo or what you did before. Otherwise, you're going to get left behind. And there's a lot of coaches that can easily brush up on what you and I have been doing for the last decade, and kind of whatever, use AI or whatever they want, and get the condensed version of that on a page, and then kind of be up to speed to what we do. Like they won't get the art of it, but they'll get the science of it pretty quick. So they're already set up to be successful. So you always, even as a seasoned coach, need to be always kind of pushing the needle and striving to get better each and every day.
Yeah, and I think there's a depth of wisdom also, that there's so much information out there right now that you have all these theoretical practices, but applying them and knowing when and how. And um, I'm a firm believer, like with exercises, there's no exercises are like tools in a toolbox. There's no bad tool. It's what's tool appropriate for the job that you have, right? And I think as you progress as a strength and conditioning practitioner, you learn when you need to pull out what tool for what job. A lot of my programs are pretty simple right now based off the training age of the student athletes I work with. And so I could easily see where someone that comes in that, just like me when I was younger, I wanted to do all the crazy new types of training there were and be on the cutting edge of stuff. But they I could see them being like, yeah, that's pretty simple. Why is he doing that? Well, it's not that I can't do other stuff. It's that this is what's appropriate based off the training age and what we need to do. To your point, at the same time, though, absolutely. Like, I think there are basic concepts and physiological applications of stress, applying stress, and rates of adaptation, and up and down the energy systems, but that aren't going anywhere. But we always need to continue to evolve and progress ourselves. Um, and and yeah, like in the end of the day, like I think sports performance is still pretty young in its practice, and we all have a lot to learn. And to another point you made just a minute ago, as we get older as strength coaches, or as we get more seasoned as strength coaches, the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know much at all.
Yeah, I know. I feel like that every single day. And I made sure I said season instead of old, because now I'm starting to feel older. Like as I sit in the training room this morning and get 4-inch needles driven through my glute and my low back. So yeah, I'm feeling older. But no, I mean, to your point, like understanding kind of the tools and knowing the appropriate thing for the job. Like I remember back in the day, like I thought everything was a hammer and I could just beat the hell out of the athletes and like, oh, that's the best way to improve them. And it's as you kind of get through your career a little bit more and more, you start adding to that toolbox and you're able to kind of make those fine-tune adjustments and realize that that's definitely not the right tool for every single job. And I know I wanted to go back to the point too, like you're talking about reaching out to people and actually going to see them in person. I mean, if we're going to talk about the perfect example of it, that's how you and I met too. Like you came all the way out from Virginia Tech, like to Fresno, California, and I tried to point you in the right direction to the best food, and hopefully you got to at least go to Doghouse. So I think that was on the list. Doghouse was on the list, right?
Man, I don't know. It's been a minute. I remember meeting you at Fresno and touring the facility. You know how those trips are though. You get a recommendation when you're on the road, and then the next thing you know, your hotel's 45 minutes away. So
Yeah, it's a
I,
rough one. But it was good. It was good. And I know we got to reconnect too when I was at Jacksonville and you were back in town playing. So it's good always to kind of stay connection and like doing those sort of things or doing stuff like this where we're still able to kind of like network and keep in touch with each other throughout their careers. Like I think that's huge advice for anybody too, like to make sure I'm not only if you're just kind of searching for a job, but like if you want to see what other people are doing in the profession, you want to really like kind of bounce ideas off of people, whether you have a big staff or a small staff, like going to do site visits and see other people like in their area, like in their dojo, see what's going on. Like, I don't think you can beat that at any point in time. Like conversations are great, but watch how a coach interacts with their athletes, like see how their program actually operates versus just ask for a program and see what's on the paper. Like you're never gonna get the full picture until you go visit in person.
yeah, looking at any information in a vacuum, like you were talking about earlier, just to get a program. There's a lot of different reasons why someone would program things. Before I got to Merrimack, I was super excited when I had programmed for all my teams. Before I got there, realized that I didn't have the student athletes I thought I did. I didn't have the equipment I thought I did. I didn't have the space I thought I did. I didn't have the time I thought I did. So I had wrote a prescription before I even had any idea of any information. Um, and so yeah.
Yeah, it's a great point. Like all those kind of like nuanced things that you talked about, like the time, the space, the equipment, training age, athletes that you're working with, all those sort of things. Like you, I mean, they're important. You don't really necessarily learn about them in a book. You have to be the deciding factor when it comes to that stuff, and you actually sit down to write the program because you can write it ahead of time, kind of like you did, but you need to really go back and kind of run it through a fine tooth comb to make sure that it actually is effective with the athletes that you're going to be working with. And it's a harsh reality for those that want to just kind of like take whatever the nicest program, just take triphasic and throw it into a 500 square foot weight room. Good fucking luck.
Yeah, and
Good
it's
luck.
it's it's applying. The art is right. It's applying theoretical concepts or principles. With in consideration of all the variables involved, right? So that's the art. You got all these different types of training, all these different stresses applied, and then taking into consideration all the other external stresses and things, especially the student athlete has going on, right? So what makes sense on paper or what makes sense to one person might, the solution might be completely different at a different school with completely different variables.
Yeah, that's a great point. Hey, you talked about a little bit like kind of the progression too, and just understanding like what's going to happen early on in your career. Obviously, if you have a growth mindset and you're working towards being successful and you're going to make different coaching stops and kind of progress through your career and up the ladder along the way, there's going to be a lot of things that kind of change in the process. Like throughout your time, like I know you've been at other stops before you got to Virginia Tech, but Virginia Tech has been kind of probably your most mainstay at this point in time. Like I think it's got to have beaten the time duration you were at Chattanooga, right?
Yep, we just beat it. So I was at Chattanooga right under six. years, and I just completed my 6th year at Virginia Tech, which is absolutely crazy.
That's awesome, man. Hey, well, within that time, like obviously like there's been like you've been promoted a couple times, like you've gone through kind of different title changes and different responsibilities and stuff like that. So there's been career progress that's also been made too. Like what kind of changes when you add on like different like step or different responsibilities within your career? Like it doesn't have to be kind of maybe specific to what you're doing necessarily, but I think it's important and needs to be noted for coaches that you're not always just going to be on the floor doing stuff. You're not always going to be doing kind of the fun things that inevitably are involved with working with a Division I program. Like there's other stuff that go behind the scenes. How has your role kind of expanded from you first arriving there? And like how important is it that like you stay up to date and you stay like kind of working on your craft, even though now like maybe your weight room time isn't always going to be the pressing priority. It is at that time, but you have so many things on your plate now.
Yeah, and sorry, I'm shuffling around my notes. I had pretty organized notes, and we got off topic real quick. So I'm scrambling at this point. Nah, no, that's a great question. So the way our department's set up, 5 directors. I technically oversee the department. That being said, we do, make a lot of decisions together. We sit down and talk about a lot of stuff and communicate very effectively with that. But we all have our team assignments. That being said, like like we talked about, I do oversee the department, so my responsibilities have changed. I don't necessarily separate them because it's impossible to do that. But my goal is to still serve my student athletes and the teams that I serve on a very high level. There's been some delegation of different teams since my role has expanded into more of the overseeing a department and administrative side of things, just because I wasn't able to do that job and serve the student athletes that I needed to in the capacity I needed to. But yeah, I'm still serving wrestling and I'm sorry, I'm still serving women's lacrosse and men's soccer. You can just edit that. And in doing so, my goal is, when I'm with them, I'm planning for them, I'm their strength coach. I'm not an administrator. I don't oversee the department. Like I'm trying to be the best strength and conditioning practitioner I can be for those teams. Along with that, there's continuing education. There's reaching out to other, women's lacrosse strength coaches, men's soccer strength coaches. I'm going to silo that out and I'm going to make sure I'm still doing that job. At the end of the day now, like, I'm also trying to learn more, not that I shouldn't have already, about leadership, about serving, the staff. And ultimately that's a lot, that's where a lot of the changes has happened is I think that we all have to serve. If you're part of a team, if you're part of a staff, you need to serve one another. And maybe I just wasn't doing as good a job as I needed to before, but that's where the big changes has happened is, I'm ultimately in charge of leading and maybe more importantly, serving the staff that we have now. I just finished my 3rd year of overseeing the department. It's been a big learning curve. I'll admit, like, I probably wasn't the best leader early on. I probably wasn't the best mentor. It was just, I was doing things in a different capacity. I wasn't serving the staff the way I needed to. And that's something that independent. So, I got my teams I'm serving and I'm still trying to be the best strength and conditioning practitioner I can for those individual teams. I put a lot of time, effort, and focus into trying to be a better leader, be a better servant towards the staff, in that capacity as well. A lot of it has to do now with, I have to see things from more of a 10,000-foot view versus, I have to be able to do both, right? I got to be able to be in the weeds with the team. And then, as far as bigger picture, I do have to have a 10,000-foot view, on the administrative side of things. I do think, it's helped me take a step back and, I used to get super fixated on certain things being, very important at this particular time with the team. And now, looking at things on a much broader scope of, or perspective, I think it's helped me with the teams I serve to be able to take a step back and, be able to look at the big picture here and there from time to time when need to be.
Yeah, I think that perspective definitely helps too. And I mean it goes without saying like just for programming, but like even I even say it too, like just with your coaching ability and kind of like how much you invest as well as a coach. Like if you're always going to be in the weeds and like in the weight room like 15, 16 hours a day, like sometimes we're going to pull some of those shifts. But if you're doing that all the time, you're not leaving, you have no kind of recharge, you go home and then you do it all again the next day. It's hard for you to really kind of like project and look at the next step and start thinking about like actually improving anything other than what you're doing in the day to day. And you're
Yep.
forced to kind of do that when you're in a leadership role because not only are you responsible for the teams that you work with and like you're in the weeds with them and when you're on with them like that's the only thing that matters that moment, but you got to take that step back and realize that you need to provide like the time, resources, and delegate things specifically for the other members of your staff so then they can be in the weeds with their teams and have everything allocated so they can be successful at their job. And that's the difference, I think, when it comes to like elevating yourself like within a department is not only are you worried about like what your teams are doing and like how the weight room looks and like practice schedules and stuff like that, but now you're worried about the resources and everything necessary for your coaches to be able to effectively coach in the best manner as possible. Like you talked about it like, hey, maybe to your own credit or you didn't think like, hey, was you were a great leader the first year that you kind of took charge and like going into year 4 now as overseeing the department on the Olympic side, like what did you kind of practically take as approach to like try to maybe improve your leadership skills or like work on trying to have conversations as more of a mentor mentee role with some of your other fellow coaches now that you're in an elevated role?
Yeah, I think you can have a system for formal evaluations, and we will have biannual evaluations that are rubric based and pretty like, and I think they're important, but a lot of it is with the informal day to day of, as a younger strength coach, I wanted everyone to know what I knew, so I was going to tell you about everything I know, and I wanted to sound smart, and for whatever you know psychological reason that is. But now it's about listening. It's about listening to the staff and making sure that you're being honest, you're being transparent, you're being genuine, and you have their best interests. I tell the staff all the time, like, if I want what's best for you. So if there's another job that potentially opens up that you're interested in, you know um, no, I want you to stay, but that's very selfish of me if it's something that you think is going to advance your career. So, I'll help you all I can in said situation. I'll be honest with you about what I think about it and how it could help your career or not. But really, just I said this earlier, serving your staff. Um, it's talking less, listening more. It's like you said, it's fighting for them. It's allocate. It's you know being there for them. It's top down leadership. It's if something happens, ultimately it's if something happens, you know it's on me, and I'm going to find a way to an extent. I'm going to find a way to rectify it. We're going to be solution oriented and find solutions. But uh, I think that all goes into serving the people that you're working with. And to be honest, before I took over as a supervisor, I think that sometimes I did just get siloed out. I communicate and collaborate, and enjoyed learning from one another. But I didn't have to serve the staff in the same capacity. I did get to walk away and didn't have to think about it for 2 weeks over the summer in particular time periods. And so yeah, like that's what kind of keeps coming back to me as we're continuing this conversation is just I think leading by example is also important, and some of the questions that I kind of prepared for, but whether it be student athletes, whether it be your staff, I think it's important for me to continue to clean. I think it's important for me to continue to, I'm in there with everyone. We're all working together to achieve common goals. Every once in a while, one of my staff members, or I take that back. One of our staff members, one of the strength and conditioning, Olympic strength and conditioning staff members at Virginia Tech, so I just called myself there. Will say like something about me being the boss or mine. It's like, no, it's us. It's we. Like we're in this together. We're a team. Yeah, we're all, we're kind of like a wrestling team. We all get our individual points based off working with our specific teams we work with, but we collectively there's a team score as well. So it's about creating. It's about like promoting unity. It's about serving the staff and trying to be their biggest advocate. And it's honestly it's a lot more selfless work. And I continue to fail at it. But that's something that I've really tried to work on as being a leader, is leading by example and serving the staff.
Yeah, I love that. Like I know you caught yourself with that too. Like it's though I think those things go a long way, just even how you word that stuff with the staff and like understanding that like, hey, this is a collective, like we're a team. It's not just me kind of delegating and telling you guys what to do. Like I'm trying to pull the same amount of information from you. I'm trying to elevate our department together. And like even though you're in the director role at that point in time, like you're not above any other job either.
Oh,
And making sure that you are, like you said, leading by example. When it comes to like just kind of how you word it, I'm sure that this kind of will be a little bit different too. But like when you talk about like kind of the mentoring, you talk about like kind of the like just how you evaluate the staff and everything like biannually. But when it comes to kind of like just the day in, day out stuff, like how are you kind of practically going around and kind of helping your staff members or providing them with feedback so that if Virginia Tech is the place that they want to be like on your staff and this is like the place for them right now and where they want to grow and where they see their future, like how are you kind of like almost making them more marketable within the university and kind of elevating their career so they can be a better member of the staff or providing them feedback in those sort of ways?
yeah, I think it's important to always, we all have a destination, or we have a desired destination where we think we want to go. If I'm wanting to go to Florida right now, a specific location, I'm going to put it in Google Maps and I'm going to start driving that direction. Well, a lot of times, there's going to be road closures, you're going to have roadblocks, there's going to be issues, and it's not just going to be a linear path. And sometimes we'll forget where we're actually trying to go. So every time we meet formally, or individually with the staff, it's like, okay, like what are your goals for next year? Where do you want to be in 5 years, right? And then as part of that, making sure that we're communicating on things that are going to align with helping us get there. That's one of the first exercises we'll do with a fellow, is say, okay, like where do you want to be in 5 years? Identify 5 people that are doing what you want to do in 5 years. Reach out to them and ask them, you know, what they're, ask them how they got there, what they would have done differently, and then if the conversation goes on long enough, what advice they have for you if they understand enough about your situation, right? So a lot of it is, brainstorming with them. Okay, you ultimately want to supervise a department, right? All right, well, here's some of the mistakes I've made along the way, and here's some of the advice I would have for you, and here's some of the actionable advice I can give you, whether it's make sure you're communicating and collaborating with administration, whether it's make sure you're not causing problems, make sure you're just doing your job at a really high level. You know, so that's to kind of summarize, it's making sure that we're discussing what long-term, short and long-term goals are, and then help me supporting those in any way that I can. And again, a lot of time, because because I have been pretty hard-headed in my life and failed forward. I think one thing I've done is, even if it takes me 3 times to realize something, I do like I do learn from my mistakes. I think it takes me a lot longer than other people, so I do have a lot of mistakes to share.
Yeah, persistency sometimes, even if it's drifting towards insanity and you're making the same mistakes, like inevitably you're either going to get a breakthrough or you're going to learn. So
Yep.
it's what you got to do. But you talked about goals a little bit too, like setting them up for maybe some of your fellows and then like some of the assistant coaches too, because like you said, you want to support everything that they want to do, whether it be in the short term as well as it is in the long term. So you can kind of make sure that what they're doing now and like that the time that they spend at Virginia Tech and like with your staff is then going to be purposeful and put them on a great path for what they want to accomplish 5 years down the road. When
Well,
it
they're putting they're putting themselves on the path. It ain't me. I'm just, you know what I mean? Like, it ain't me putting them on. And I want to preface this. We're talking a lot about me being a mentor and a leader, and I've kind of alluded to this a couple of times. Like I'm still working on it. Like I'm not there. You know, but I am working on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think a great leader has humility in that moment. So like even with you saying those sort of things, like I think everybody gets in those positions, and if you're a really good leader too, you're humble and you understand that like what you're doing now is still not good enough. Like you can be
Mm-hmm.
confident again without being super cocky, and you can understand that there's always points in time where you can get better. And I mean, we're human, we're going to make mistakes. And at the same time, like what you can do from those mistakes and how you're going to make sure that you don't repeat them and you can pass on those lessons, especially like in an apprenticeship type of job skill and like career that we have, like coaching, the more you can kind of pass on those lessons and hopefully help some of the younger coaches or fellow coaches and colleagues like not necessarily have to experience the things that you did and help them avoid some of those pitfalls, the better, because that only kind of elevates the profession. It makes you question and think about like the mistake that you made previously and solidifies like, hey, I won't do that again. Like I know what to do in the future. And then it also helps them or maybe they have some good advice. So I mean, humility and like being able to kind of have people where you can have those conversations with and discuss things like that only benefits both parties because again, it's a discussion versus just like a fellow or an intern just asking you like a question they could easily find out. It's an honest discussion where you can share things and they can share things and you're both bettering from that conversation.
100%.
Hey, so you talked about like goal setting and even if like you're working on yourself as a leader and going through all those things, like you're driving the ship when it comes to the department. And like ultimately, like a good leader is going to pass on, like they're going to pass on kind of the credit and they're going to take on all the blame. Like that's just kind of the nature of that rank and the role. But also when it comes to goal setting, like you need to make sure that like if you're looking at that 10,000 foot view, what you do in the department is also in line with what the athletic department also has in line and what the Virginia Tech has in line as well, so that you're on the right path. But how do you guys kind of go about setting goals for like your side of the strength conditioning department? Like what and then what kind of, in your opinion, makes like what you guys do really stand out and set you apart from some of the other places or you kind of pride yourself on?
Yeah. I think that, you know, our mission statement, like most strength and conditioning department's mission statement is, we're trying to reduce the risk of injury, which that's a loaded topic. You're not going to alleviate or, you're using theoretical, uh, you know, principles that make sense and should help reduce injury, but you're never going to, you're never going to alleviate injury, and we're never going to take credit for injuries not happening. Enhance performance, and then especially in this population, we want to educate and help teach kids how to be successful at life. Teach them life skills, right? So everything needs to point to that North Star. And as far as ours, we need to be aware of, like you suggested, we need to be aware of our athletic department's mission statement and core values. We need to be aware of the school's mission statement and core values. We're going to hire people at Virginia Tech that, and I think if you talk to most departments at most schools, they're like, okay, this school is unique because of this. Virginia Tech is a really unique place. The community is unique in the way it supports the school. It's a very community based athletic department. There's most people like each other. They like hanging out. There's a lot of haze. It's not so transactional from a day to day basis. So, you know, with all that in consideration, um, in our mission statement consideration, everything that we do has to, point toward that direction. And that where that kind of gets into, as someone who is supervising a department, someone's going to leader, a leader, it's about making decisions when you do have to make the decision on your own, is what's fair and what's best for everyone. And that isn't going to make everyone happy, right? But when you take a step back, look at a 10,000 foot view, and you're looking at what team assignments you're going to give to said strength coach, or what departmental responsibilities or what administrative responsibilities, how you're going to delegate things out, how we're going to decide to schedule the teams, how we're going to whatever it is. Everything points back to what's fair, what's best for everyone, us working together as a team. And then is it in line with the core values of the school, the athletic department, and our mission statement? And our staff all the time we'll run into a situation where it's like, what should I do? And it's like, okay, we need to serve the student athletes. We need to make sure that what we're doing is in line with our mission statement and pointing everything in that direction. And sometimes just like the Google analogy just a minute ago, sometimes you can get off track. And I always tell them and tell the staff, like, whatever we do, we try to avoid, we want to communicate, we want to collaborate, we try to avoid any kind of confrontation. We want to, we want the same thing the sports coaches want, the other support staff want. So we're all in it working together, trying to get on the same bus and drive in the same direction. Even if there are, situations where not everyone's not in line, like, is what we're doing what's in the best interest of the student athletes and what's in line with, our mission statement and our job.
I like that. No, it's great. Like it's what we talked about too, like being in that director role. Like you don't, as an assistant or young coach, you don't realize like all the things that are kind of going on behind the scenes because you're worried about coaching. You think that's kind of the most important thing, but there's a lot of other ways and decisions that are made within an athletic department or even a strength conditioning department too, that have an impact on what goes on when you get down to like the minutia and like you're actually having interaction with that student athlete and you're coaching them in that day to day. There's a lot of small decisions that happen kind of behind the curtain that get you to that point that allows a coach to kind of pick what the sets and reps look like for that day. And it's overwhelming as a young coach to realize those things are going on. And that's why it takes experience and everything to get to a position and to handle that burden and see not only like the vision for what you have as a department, but what other departments that are bigger conglomerates that kind of encompass what you're doing also have a vision like moving forward. And it's a lot to think of and kind of have on mind, but like when you have everything set aside and under control within like your microcosm of it, and it's in line with what other people in the university are doing, it makes your job a lot easier because if you're squared away, chances are you're going to get more resources, you're going to do good things, you're going to be more attractive for people to come in, and you ultimately get to impact your athletes and teams a lot more.
Absolutely. And I kind of danced around your question about what makes our department special or unique. I definitely think that the staff that we have is special and unique. The people that that we have in our positions as directors and who serve the student athletes, and really, like, it's a balance of, we want to do our jobs at a really high level. We want to do the simple things really, really well. We do spend a lot of time with each other, so we want to enjoy each other's company. We want to work together. We want to, we want to find solutions together. And I think we're just trying to grow together. Like, we just have, a lot of people, everyone on our staff are good people at heart or at the core, and we all want to improve as professionals and as people. And I know that's kind of cliche and kind of, that's nothing spectacular. But yeah, I think we just want to, we're good people that want to get better.
No, that's great. It's like you said, it's kind of the team behind the team. And when you have a department that's all on the same page and wants to grow together and like solve problems together and has the same mission and everything is together, like it's only going to benefit the athletes. And like, again, being around each other all the time and not hating each other is a super, super big bonus when it comes to like a weight room and being involved in strength conditioning, because you want those people kind of on your side and be able to kind of help with things that happen like in life, or just help on the floor and bounce ideas off of and just kind of feel energized and ready and excited to go to work. So it only helps when like-minded people are on board. And I'm sure like when it comes to like the hiring process and like even when you're starting to kind of vet people for fellowships and stuff like that, since you're so well like versed on what you want and like what your core values look like, it's it's got to make the process of actually bringing people on board just a little bit more cut and dry of, well, they don't kind of meet this criteria. Like, I don't know if they're really going to fall into the system. Like, since you've been on the side of hiring, when it comes to like maybe just strength conditioning as a whole, a lot of people kind of get upset when it comes to the hiring process of like, hey, well, I'm qualified. And then you get kind of the old adage of like, well, they weren't the right fit. Like when it comes to that stuff, like how important is it for like you not only to get the person that's qualified and maybe meets the bare minimum of it, but like how much more important is it for you to get the right fit into your organization versus just the most qualified person?
I think it's crucial. Hiring, I think, is one of the most important things you can do. Um, as a super anyone that's in charge of hiring it, and our hiring process is very comprehensive in a sense of, all the staff members are included, support staff's included, sport coaches are included. And I know sometimes, a lot of chefs in the kitchen can be tough, but it does need to be a comprehensive assessment, and it does need to be the right fit. And so yeah, it's something that I put a lot of time, effort, attention into, and yeah, it's crucial. The idea is to hire really good people and get out of their way. As any kind of supervisor, hire really good people, support them, get them what they need, and get out of their way and let them do their thing and learn from them. Right. So not just, just as much as we've talked a lot about me giving feedback or me assessing people, like part of selfishly, half the questions I have every time we assess somebody is, what can I do better, and give me feedback. And I know that's tough. There's a lot of people who were my supervisors who I wasn't going to be completely honest with. So, I tell them all the time, like, just be honest with me. Like, I'm not your boss. I'm not your supervisor. I'm not whatever right now. Just, give me some feedback as well. That's going to help me grow also. But you know, anytime we bring someone in, one of the first things they're asked to do is present. Like, we want to know what you know. Like, what do you feel passionate about? Present to our staff, and then a lot of times, I'll walk around and grab a card and look at it while they're training a team, and it's like, I'm not trying to micromanage you. I'm not checking in on you. I want to learn. Like, why are you doing what you're doing? Um, there's a quality control to that I have to uphold, and we have to uphold as a staff. There's certain things that, yeah, I'm the one that's going to get called to the principal's office if things don't go right. But yeah, we all want to learn from one another, and it doesn't matter if you're a fellow that's coming in. We just hired a fellow, and she did a graduate thesis on like force plate ISO holds, mid the ISO holds, and I was like, that's something that we're starting to dabble in. I was like, teach us now, let's go. Like, we want to learn, right? Like, we have a general idea of it, but we haven't been immersed in it the way you have, we haven't collected information the way you have. Like, help us get better, right? So it doesn't matter if it's a fellow or whoever it is. I think there's something to learn from everyone.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, there is a quality kind of control to it, and obviously, like being the top like seat within the department, like it's if something goes wrong, it's going to fall on your shoulder. So you do have to kind of check up, but without micromanaging. Again, like we talk about the balance and making sure there's a dichotomy to all of it, and there's a give and a take. So without going overboard, you still can go in there and again learn and see what they're doing and be inquisitive to it because you want to hire people that are maybe double down and like complement like your weaknesses because
Yep.
that's what happens when you ultimately have a full-time like a full staff like that. You want people to be excelling at something and be passionate about something and bring that strength to the table because it only elevates the department. And if you have like a resident like subject matter expert right in the desk next to you, why not have them teach the rest of the staff? Why do you even need to go out and like pay for some of these like obviously going out and doing some of the certification stuff like that is important, but if you even want to see if it's worth it and someone on staff is certified in that, why aren't they the first person that goes and teaches the rest of the performance staff and do in-house development and then only elevate you guys.
100%. Yeah.
Hey, so kind of shifting gears a little bit. I know we touched on it in the beginning, and I know you were like, I don't know if I want to do that yet, but hey, we've had other people on the show too that hey, their strength coach like days are still there. Like maybe strength isn't just the only thing that they're doing anymore. And I know it might deep down cut you to your core as a football player. Um, but what kind of got you involved in doing some more endurance based like training and kind of I know you did your first marathon I think last Thanksgiving, but what kind of gets you what started that whole process and got you involved in that?
First off, there are a lot of strength coaches out there. I feel like the world needs more conditioning coaches, and that's where I come in. Now, it's funny. So the first 10 years after I played college football, I trained like a football player. And then eventually I was like, all right, or football player slash bodybuilder slash, I also cared the way I looked aesthetically. And I did when I played football as well. But, and then, it kind of went on a period of just general health. And then when I first got to Virginia Tech, I really didn't do much for a couple of years. And then when I took over as the overseeing the department, there was a year where I just it was high stress. I didn't want to fail. It was the first time I had an opportunity to be in that position. And I wanted to try to get ahead of any mistake I made. And I ended up like just in poor health, poor mental health, poor physical health. And so I remember, what year was it? 2 years ago, I guess 2022. Annual physical, got my blood test, and fasting glucose was up. Cholesterol was up, blood pressure was up, like all these different things were elevated. And I'm not a doctor, so I'm like, don't I know cholesterol is controversial. I know fasting glucose, like, don't shoot. I'm not a doctor. But I had a lot of things that were trending in a bad direction. My mental health was all over the place. Like I was, and so I was like, all right, I've got to change. I've got to change. Like I want to be there for my wife, my future kids. It just wasn't a healthy environment or situation. So, I started. I was like, I got to exercise. I got to eat right. I started seeing a therapist. I wanted to throw the kitchen sink at it. I wanted to get myself back. I needed a balance, and I think you can create a win-win in any profession you're in. You can progress yourself. You can, you can develop yourself as a professional. You can improve. You can do all these things, but you can also create a balance. And I know as a strength and conditioning coach, like during the semesters and certain times of year, that balance is a little bit off. But you need to, there still needs to be a balance, even when you're deep in semesters. And when you're not in a semester, you need to take time off over winter and summer or whenever those breaks are. But getting back to what I was talking about, started seeing a therapist. I had a coworker at the time, Kelly Murphy, who is a fantastic strength coach as well as a great dietitian. She put together some nutrition stuff for me. And then I was like, all right, like I have a family history of cardiovascular disease as well. I don't want to, like, if something's going to kill me, it's not going to be my heart. And so I was like, all right, I just need to get in shape. Right. So I started doing some cross training, a little lifting, a little this, a little that. And I was like, it's not enough for me just to say, all right, like I'm doing this for 20 years from now. I need, even aesthetics wasn't enough at this point. It's like, I need something to work toward. Right. So as part of my cross training, I was running, and I was like, well, what if I just sign up for a half marathon, whatever. And, so I signed up for half marathon. I found a plan somewhere. I kind of cross-checked it with my interpretation of energy system development at the time, and or comprehensive energy system development. And then I went and ran a half marathon. And from there, I was like, all right, like this is something that I can get better at. I can compete at. I can, multiple motivations. I'm getting healthier. I'm improving my cardiovascular fitness and just my cardiovascular health. And it's something that I can get now results with. I've been primarily with field sports over the past 6 years now. So, comprehensive, and I've used this term several times now, like comprehensive energy system development and stress management is a lot different than just, some of my earlier experiences in this field was being in a weight room. And I knew the different energy systems, but now like this was a chance also for me to deep dive in specifically with some of the internal loads on, what is an aerobic threshold? What is an anaerobic threshold? What is a VO2 max? How do these things, how these things coexist with each other? Like when do you train what? Like, again, in theory, I knew a lot, but practically I didn't know much. So I started working with, soccer, lacrosse when I first got here, started getting internal and external loads. So I had a base for 3 years of understanding these things better than I did before. And then once, running was also a way for me to learn about energy systems a little bit better as well firsthand. It's simple. Like sports are messy, intermittent, most sports are intermittent. They're, as far as like developing energy systems, you're doing a lot of development in early off season and general prep, but specific prep, you got to prepare them for the sport. And that's a whole nother podcast. But so it was a chance there's multiple motivations at this point for me to get into this and be able to compete at something. And it's something honestly I never thought I'd do, and I didn't really like. So anytime you have something that you not good at, and maybe you don't like, maybe you do, and you start seeing results, like you start building confidence in it, right? And at first I'd run a 10-minute mile and my heart rate would be like 190, and then all of a sudden I was like, man, like my heart rate's at 150 now. It's at 140 when I'm doing this. So I just started being able to, like, I learned a lot from it, and I'm continuing to learn from it. I'm still a novice or novice but it's something that, so now I think I've done, I don't know, 7 or 8 half marathons in 2 years. I've done one marathon. I've actually overtrained several times and made myself sick to where I missed races. Um,
Nice.
so yeah. I get that's my theory anyway. Yeah, there's been several times where I ended up with a bad flu one time where I was coming off, had about to start my perfect taper, feeling great, and then whew, got me. But yeah, short story long in this, you know, it was really, a part of a bigger story of me taking care of myself. And it's I'm going to exercise when I have time. I'm going to take care of myself when I have time. Well, as you get older, you're never going to have time. You got to make time. So that's I've continued on it. Like I don't know if I'm going to do it forever, but right now I'm still getting better at it. I've had a couple setbacks. I pulled my hamstring pretty much off. A pretty significant tear doing something stupid a while back that I won't mention. But yeah, it's something, and as part of this, hopefully I can make my cardiovascular system so robust and that cardiovascular disease isn't what kills me, along with eating healthier and, you know, reducing stress.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there too, and just it all kind of started from like that kind of a small health scare and actually going to get, I mean, testing done, and from there it spun off into all these positive different things, like whether it affected your health and like positively, like helped your coaching, like it kind of kept you curious and started working on programming, all these things that kind of spun off from it. It's huge. And I know we joke a lot of times too, like with strength and conditioning coaches, like sometimes we just shorten it to be strength coach because a lot of people just don't know the conditioning side very well. And I know I fall victim to it because even if I really want to like label it differently, okay, I'm probably a strength and speed and agility coach. The conditioning side is so different. And yeah, you work with so many different teams and you kind of have a cursory knowledge of it, and it's coming from like textbooks and different like tables and charts, and like, hey, if you're at this heart rate, you're at this. If you're at this time duration, you're in this zone. But again, it's we talk about like doing so much work and practicing what you preach. If you go in the weight room, it's a lot easier to squat and know what that feels like. But it's a lot harder to get to 190, like a work zone 5 or 190 beats per minute, or figure out what it feels like to run a half marathon and be in a completely oxidative zone. So those things are kind of important. I know every coach doesn't need to do that necessarily, but at least kind of adding that in and having some kind of basis and background to it, I think that's huge. Like you talked about it, like though your field sports are or who you work with primarily. So how big of like an impact has that already kind of made? Like we talked about the health benefits and everything for you, and just kind of being overall, like mentally, physically, like spiritually, emotionally, all those benefits that kind of help you individually with your family and coaching and stuff. But like as a practitioner, how much like more connected do you kind of start feeling with your field sports because they run on a daily basis?
Yeah, I think in line with a 10,000 foot view and some of the other responsibilities that I've been tasked with, it was, you know, it's like taking a step back and saying the majority of my early career was spent in a weight room. And there, like, don't get me wrong, strength, power, like, there's a lot to gain that, from spending time in a weight room, getting stronger, getting more powerful, extremely important. And arguably in any, I mean, I'm distance running now and I still lift. It looks different, but cross country runners should lift. Everyone should lift, right? I do think that most of the time in the weight room we're primarily working on the first energy system. Yeah, you may do some metabolic circuits. Yeah, you may do some other things that cross over. You're maybe getting in some glycotic states here and there, and there's always this undertone of your heart rate's probably in a lower level aerobic zone, especially if you're supersetting things. But um, you know, when you're training a soccer player, like they're using all energy systems, and it, you have to make sure you're developing. My job is to help them become the most successful soccer player they can, based off the sport, based off the position, not just keeper versus field player. Like, our outside backs, they have certain, you know, they have certain things that they'll do during a game, certain stresses, certain physiological adaptations that are needed, certain external loads, internal loads versus a center back or a midfielder, whether you're box to box or you're kind of a holding. Like within the sport itself and the positions, there's a lot of different energy system needs potentially within the same sport, right? So I have and the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know anything. I have a much more comprehensive, at least idea of what questions I need to be asking, and a better idea of, okay, how do these energy systems um, work together, and how do I need to develop? I could lift if I got a outside back that's going to run 8 to 10 miles in a game, including the warm up. I could lift them 4 days in a row. I could do all the Nordics and all the RDLs, which are all important. But if I didn't specifically prepare him to do what he's going to have to do on the field, then I've failed. And a lot of the energy system development is not just in that first energy system. It's a combination of all three energy systems. So, really not a old moment, but it was like, all right, you know, I remember when I was writing programs for soccer, and I don't want to say other schools because I feel like I did a disservice to some of these schools, but I'm lifting a soccer team 3 days a week and I'm running them twice. And the amount of work that I'm assigning, in the weight room, we have rep sets and intensities, and we know what we're assigning. We can measure it. On the field now, because of different technologies, we can, assess and monitor volumes and intensities of external loads and internal loads. Well, like now that I know I have the information on what I have the information on specifically to the sports I work with, like I was way off the mark probably. If I'm assigning 2 speed agility conditioning days, quote unquote, and 3 lift days, that may be okay early off season, when I'm wanting to maybe emphasize, some of the, strength power, stresses and adaptations. But as we get closer to the season, the first week, there's usually is the most volume and the highest intensities of the whole season in our, for example, soccer. And if I prepare them for, an arbitrary number of 10 miles per se, and their first week's going to be 30 miles, like let's forget the high speed distance. Let's forget the aggressive accels, decels. Like I'm way off the mark. I haven't specifically prepared them. It's our job to, in my opinion, to prepare them for practice. Practice is going to prepare them for competition. And I have to get them to where they can not only handle, but be successful through the volumes and intensities that the sport coaches are going to, that they're going to, the stresses that they're going to elicit. So, and that's where the art of, we've been measuring stuff in the weight room forever. Like there's a lot, there's this argument back and forth about whether you're a sports scientist or you're a strength coach, and there's this polarization of it a lot of times, and you got to be both. You got to track. You got to. I think it's just like in the weight room, understanding volumes and intensities is important. As part of looking at comprehensive energy system stresses. Um, at this, and if you, I think you're naive not to have a general understanding of what you're going to have to prepare them for. And then you get into the nuances and the minute of high speed distance and excels, decels, and based off the position, all this other stuff. There's definitely rabbit holes to that. But yeah, so backing up 3 minutes, 5 minutes ago, you know, just doing distance running or participating in distance running, and just that a simple, okay, there's a volume and an intensity to a run, external load, internal load. There's what is my aerobic threshold, what is my anaerobic threshold, what is my VO2 max. Does it matter if I want to train certain qualities? If I need to improve my VO2 max for said reason, all right, here's how I need to do that. Here's the heart rate zones I need to be in. Here's you know and here's my specific zones. If I'm trying to improve lactic threshold, it's really helped me better understand, more than anything, the internal loads. But it also, in conjunction with the sports I've been working with, has really helped me better understand like the big picture as a whole, versus I'm working on this puzzle, and instead of working on this corner, and I can do this corner really good. Now I'm thinking about the big picture, and if I'm at a school with maybe I have 10 teams, you still need to be aware of total stresses applied. But I think that now I have two teams, and then I have administrative duties. Like I think I can do more than just be a weight room guy. Like I'm more part of everything. And with that, even though I might not be applying stresses, it's my job to, educate the sport coaches, or work with the sport coaches on the physiological stresses, and potential outcomes based off what we're doing.
No, that's great. I think all that stuff that you talked about, that comes as a direct result of you just kind of diving in the deep end and going through and practicing all this stuff yourself. And yeah, like it accumulates over time, just as you get more comfortable with it yourself and kind of seeing your own physiological like adaptations and seeing how you progress with it, and kind of again like getting curious with your own training. It definitely benefits like when you look at your field sports and then you start diving into the woods a little bit deeper with, all right, well, I'm not just going to program every single training session to be the same for all these individual players. Like I have the ability to kind of, whether it be for monitoring systems and having a better understanding and just having the time allotted and available, now you can really start to like dole out the same sort of specific stimuli that you want on the field that we're already doing in the weight room. And it's an important thing. And I know I fall victim to this too. Like that's something that I need to work on more too. Like just being able to adjust the sets, reps, and adjust the intensity when it comes to the conditioning and like the speed and agility, like the total volume, the total intensity that you're going to get outside during a session, because that's as close as you're going to get for a lot of sports to what they're actually going to do and exhibit and play during competition. So if I can really dial that in and not just think that, hey, the weight room and dialing that in perfectly that should theoretically help them on the field. All right, well, now I could take it a step further. Like that is already dialed in. Let me get a little bit closer to the field and what I'm doing. And then making sure, like you said, the comprehensive like energy system development, can I dial that even more and feel even more comfortable that what I'm doing during our practice sessions, like our training sessions, prepare them for practice and ultimately prepare for the game. So it's awesome that like your own training is kind of like skyrocketed that towards helping your athletes and then in turn.
Yeah. And talking about, I kind of break most off seasons up into general prep and specific prep. Sorry, I just stepped on my dog. And general prep, I kind of compare it to a soup. General prep, you are working on different ingredients of the soup, right? Maybe improving your lactic threshold is going to lead to ultimately you being a better soccer player. But that's down the road. Like I'm strength, power, speed, being able to stay, use aerobic mechanisms or longer, improving VO2 max, whatever it is. Those are all the different ingredients. And then ultimately you have to, it's all theoretical. Okay, I'm gonna do this, and then when I go to put it all together, I'm gonna have a better soup. But I'm gonna make all the ingredients better first, and then I'm gonna put it all together. And that's what a lot of times we like. That's some of the challenges now with sports that are playing year round or have a in the collegiate setting have a traditional season and a non-traditional season. I completely understand why you'd have a non-traditional season. If my soccer guys are only gonna compete for 3 months out of the year, and they're not gonna like compete against anyone the rest of the year. Like, I think that's a disservice. I think we need to be competing more than just 3 or 4 months out of the year. That being said, the only true off seasons that we get with that specific team is in the summer and in the winter, and they're not with us, right? Not saying they should be or going into a different topic, but so that's the challenge a lot of times is you don't really get to work on specific properties, right? You're always putting it all together. You're always making the suit. You always got to put it together. We'll have 6 weeks of off season before we start playing friendly competitions in the spring, and how much are you really going to move the needle in 6 months on certain things? And guess what? You have to, 6 weeks, 3 of those 6 weeks, there's going to be specific prep leading into, making sure that they can compete in a game. So a lot of the times the first 2 weeks of, we have 8-hour weeks or the first 2 or 3 weeks. And, you'd think, okay, if we don't play until forever, we might be emphasizing strength, power, speed, maybe, among other things. But yes, I'm giving them more doses of that because we don't have a competition on Saturday. But I also know that when they go to 20-hour weeks, they're going to have a certain amount of volume and intensity that I have to prepare them for. So a lot of times, some of the specific speed agility work is going to kind of take a back seat in those first 3 weeks of our 8-hour weeks, because I know when they jump to 20 hours, they've got to be able to handle the loads. So a lot of it is preparing them for the 20 hours. And you're not going to be able to prepare them for total volumes when you go into 20 hours. And if our sport coaches are really good about making sure that we slowly progress them. We don't jump from, again, arbitrary, maybe we do 8 miles of work, 10 miles of work, 12 miles of work the first 3 3 8-hour weeks, to jump into 25 miles and doubling the amount of work we're doing. We're going to be smart about the volumes and intensities that we're programming, which goes back to the conversation with the sport coaches. But yeah, man, I got off topic.
No, it's perfect. No, it's perfect.
Yeah.
No, just kind of like you talked about, just kind of dialing all that stuff in, and again, it's that perspective and having the view of everything and figuring out where all that stuff falls within the whole training scope. And if, like you talked about, having men's soccer and the competitive season is all boiled down to 3 months, and like we know what the landscape of NCAA hour will look like, and then just kind of the structure of the school system, you have to be very strategic. It might not be optimal, like when you're kind of putting that soup together, to just say, well, this is general prep and this is going to lead us into these spring competitive seasons. But you also, again, like when we talked about just how you design that perfect program, you have to know all those variables, and it might not be exactly what you want to do or you think that'll prepare them best, but with those variables, like having the summer and them away, or knowing that you have to get ready for 5 like non-traditional season like spring games, like you can't really just go all general, and you have to understand like what the best thing to do is, like work on some specific qualities and then kind of throw that in the soup, because that's what's going to get them ready for what the really like time that matters is in the fall, when all those games actually do count. So no, it's again like just understanding and have like more knowledge of like how you progress conditioning, and then understanding that conditioning and like that total volume and stuff that like you're practicing yourself, you can still relay that information and have probably better conversations with the sport coaches, knowing how it impacts you, knowing the physiology of what's happening, so that they can focus on the sports skill. And you can kind of be, again, like just a reference point to understand that, hey, your sports skill and like what kind of thing technical qualities you're trying to exhibit out here has a stress and an effect. And you can have those conversations a little bit easier, just I think from the information and from your own practical training too.
Absolutely. Yep. And that, that was well summarized. Thanks for bringing me back.
Now you're good,
um,
man. Hey, that's
uh,
why I'm on this end. I'm on this end so that
yeah,
I can
yeah.
let you keep going.
But that's the art, right? Like we talk about all these different variables and like that's the art of it. There's a science behind it, but that's the art.
I know. And that's I think like the soup is like even a better analogy. And I'm a terrible baker. I'm not even terrible. I'm not even anywhere near understanding how to follow those directions. Like, and then a cook, like I'm just putting together one ingredient stuff and making it in huge quantities and just throwing it in containers. That's all I do.
Yeah.
But it's a better analogy like when you talk about soup because there's no perfect way to do it like there is. You can fuck up cupcakes and a cake real easy if you just off by little ingredients. Like for strength conditioning, it is an art because you can make the soup and kind of put different ingredients here and balance stuff out, and it'll come out completely different. And most of the time, it won't come out terrible if you put the right stuff in it. And if you put
Yep.
like 5 cups of salt in it, you're definitely going to ruin it. Um, but it's not to say that if you put a little bit less of something here or there, it's not going to come out well. That's where the art comes in. It's completely unique to how you kind of prepare. And like the same as whatever team wins the championship that year. I guarantee if you like look across the board, like the programs might look very similar and might look vastly different. There's so many other variables that go into place that kind of create their team and their soup when they're all done and said. And that's why strength conditioning is so fun. There is a huge art to it.
Yeah. And a buzzword that was going around a couple of years ago was, asking a question and saying it depends. And then a lot of people started getting mad about people saying it depends. It does depend.
It really does. Hey, for those that are kind of like interested in like breaking into like conditioning, and I know you're gonna probably cut me off and say that you're no resident expert in conditioning, so I'll save you
Nope.
from it. But like I know your start was, hey, like all the health concerns, I'm like, hey, you just signed up for a race. But if you were going to give some advice to like some coaches that wanted to like improve the other part of the strength conditioning coach side and like work on energy system development from a practical standpoint, like what would you say? Like talking to sport coaches, the track coaches, like just signing up for a race or literally just going out and trying something that's not strength based. Like what would you suggest is the best way to kind of get going from your experience?
Yeah, I think you go back to like general physiological principles of stress and adaptation and what the NSCA book says, like on adaptation, right? And work to rest ratios and, just simplify the energy systems, but be aware that, there are there are different energy systems and um, they all work together in different ways depending on what outcome you're desiring or what you have to do. I do think there are different resources out there. There's different books. Joel Jamison's Ultimate MMA is something that has a lot on the front end of on the front of the book. It has a lot of like basic physiological information, and then it goes into the weeds and of some different things. Any field sport, like there's a lot of soccer. There's tons of information out there on just developing energy system. Pick a sport that is like requires a lot of strength, power, speed, as well as metabolic demands, and like you said, get out there and do it. Like think about if you've ever played basketball or if you've ever um, you know played anything that was intermittent but fairly continuous and required you to be fast. And um, there's plenty of educational resources. I wasn't trying to name drop just one because there's a ton. Um, Again, getting back into the fundamentals and like you said, experimenting and get a heart rate monitor, right? Like if you have an Apple Watch, you can, if you go for a run, you can look at pace and distance. It's not going to get all your accels, decels, and all that other fun stuff, but get a heart rate monitor and start like trying to better understand the internal loads that you're putting your body through during training, even when you're lifting. what's going on? And then, uh, that's your, cardiorespiratory stress, and then your musculoskeletal stress. And those are the kind of the two things I break them down to now as far as internal load, external load. Um, Lifting is a musculoskeletal stress. It can also have an internal load component to it, depending on your work to rest ratios. Um, but yeah, I mean, to your point, I think, you know, getting, I think getting, doing it right and is important versus just being grounded. It's just like being a strength and conditioning coach and practice it. Like everything's in theory until you apply it practically. So by doing some of these things, you're just practically applying it on yourself, and it will. In my case, it's helped me better understand it anyway.
Yeah, I like what you said. Like everything is in theory until you actually practically apply it. Like it's got to be different a little bit. Like when you like working with football players, like they want to see guys that look like them. Like they want someone that's been in the trenches that like understands the sport. Like same with basketball. Like even if you didn't necessarily play the sport, they want people that understand like the stressors they go through and like kind of the mental and physical side of what the game looks like and be able to like speak in their own terms. Have you noticed, or like if you kind of like think back a little bit, since I'm pretty sure you worked with women's lacrosse and men's soccer all 6 years so far, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So like has there been maybe any sort of like shift with some of the athletes or even like the coaches that you've interacted with that might have changed a little bit since you've been doing a little bit more of this conditioning side, and like have the conversations been a little bit more different? Because like when you practice what you preach as a strength coach, and like no one's going to trust a skinny chef. So if you're a strength coach and you go in and you know what you're talking about in the weight room, like it's evident, like as a young athlete or someone that comes in. But sometimes it's a little bit harder to portray that when you're on the field and you're doing conditioning stuff, and it's closer to the sport that they're more attuned to and like they're more knowledgeable on most of the time. But because conditioning and like all the energy system development you're starting to work on, like I'm trying to shorten this question, but does it make it look like you kind of know what you're talking about a lot more and those athletes buy in a little bit easier because now you know both realms a lot better than just kind of being an expert in one?
Yeah, I'm wearing off on you, man. You're starting to get long-winded. I'm just kidding. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would use the word street cred. If and it's funny because I don't like to be like I did this or whatever, but every once in a while, I'll have a long run on Saturdays for the most part, and we'll have practice at 11, and I'll get up at 5 and go run, and so they're gonna do 4 or 5 miles at practice, and it's not the same. Their stresses are end up being a lot more than mine, but they'll be saying something like, "Yeah, I ran 8 this morning," so it's and they do see me. It's weird. Like I'll come in from a run at lunch or whatever, and they'll see me just sweating to death and fatigued. And yeah, I think it is important. I don't think you have to necessarily practice what you preach, but I do think it's important for our student athletes to see us like going through working toward goals, competing, going through putting our bodies through hard stuff, right? It doesn't have to be the same thing, but I do think um that our student athletes seeing us um you know doing physical activities and competing um can be important. I don't think it's essential, but I definitely think it can be important. 100%. And I've got a little wacky and assigned some 800s in the early off season over the summer, and for specific reasons. And another again, I'm going to get some emails saying I shouldn't be running 800s with soccer players. I can explain. But they'll be like, "What?" I'll get a text. "What the hell were you thinking?" I'm like, "Well, I did them." And I'm not getting into the I did them versus this did them, but yeah, short story long, I do think it's important for your student athletes, or it can be important for them to see you competing at stuff, see you struggling through stuff, see you going through some of the same stuff they're going through, even though it's not the exact same.
Yeah, I think it makes you more relatable and makes you it makes you human. Like it's I've talked to people that like or whatever it is, like, the what old adage, like, you don't want to meet your heroes, because then you realize like they're human too. But that's kind of one of the appealing sides of it too, because they see you at points in time where you could be relatable to them. And as a coach, and you spend so much time with them, and like in a leadership role or in a mentorship kind of role and capacity as well, like they want to know, especially when they're going through so many different stressors in their life, whether in the classroom, like on the field, in the weight room, like personally, like whatever else is going on too. Like they want to know that other people have kind of gone through that and come out through the other side. And when you're doing stuff like that and you're challenging yourself, even past like your college career too, like it's got to be inspiring too, and it's got to be something where, again, you can showcase to them, just like the same way that you started picking up doing endurance training as well, was the what I'm teaching you now not only helps you performance wise, like, and carries over to your sport, but this is health and wellness, and this is habits that you can carry forth and pass down, like if you have a family, and when you get older as well too. Because I mean, we don't want to get really like super philosophical with it, but like you talked about, these are life lessons and stuff that we're using as a conduit through the weight room and through training. So it's it is bigger than that. If you start like kind of zooming out a little bit, and you get out of, hey, we're just weight coaches or we're just conditioning coaches, like there's a bigger picture, and there's a lot more lessons that you can kind of take from what we're talking about on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I mean, you're in the trenches with them a little bit. I do want to make a couple notes. First off, I am not a great runner. I'm a decent runner that I'm getting better slowly. Secondly, I also understand there are a lot of different ways to uh, improve your cardiovascular endurance. Running is, doing the same thing every day in repetitive movements and straight lines and the same plane of motion is probably not the most ideal. So again, before I understand all these things, and I try to, I'll do some things in different planes and try to level stuff out. But it's just what I'm having fun with now, and I can get my heart rate up, and something I can compete with, like I said. But yeah, yeah. Circling back around, definitely, I think just being in the trenches with them, and uh, suffering's a bad word, but just working towards stuff.
I gotcha. Well, one day I'll get a compliment in before you can shoot me down, and maybe next time we talk, you'll be on triathlons or something too, and kind of break up the running monotony.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't. I'm not a big. I'm a terrible swimmer. Like I can swim, but not very efficient. So that would be bad. And I like the bike, but I don't think I'd want to do it like that. I'll just stick with running for now.
All
We'll
right.
see.
Well, I'll circle back with you in a little bit.
Yeah,
We'll see
circle
what
back 2 years.
happens.
I'll be back into powerlifting.
Hey, so coach, I know like any good training session, we end the show with the finisher, and this is right up your alley for some of the endurance stuff now. And so we got 4 quarters, 4 questions, and maybe overtime at the end. So you can go fast on any of them, or you could take your time on any. But you ready?
Uh, I hope so. As ready as
Hey,
I'm going to be.
hey, that's it. That's all you need. Hey, so first one I got for you, biggest influence in strength and conditioning and favorite athlete growing up.
Oh, favorite athlete's easy, Michael Jordan, and I'm sure that's the answer for most people. Biggest influence in strength and conditioning. Mm. I'm gonna the strength and conditioning coaches that I've had growing up, I think had the biggest impact. I just saw the impact and influence they had on me, as well as some of my the other student athletes that they were working with at the time. So yeah, not a specific one, but I would just say the mentors I had growing up.
All right. Hey, so when you're not coaching, and when you're not on the road running or in the weight room, like what are some of your favorite hobbies that are outside of like the weight room?
Mm. Uh, I'm going to generally say social environments, and there's obviously sometimes I need to disconnect, but I just like being with friends, being with people. I'm lucky enough to be within driving distance of my family as a strength and conditioning practitioner. But I love, getting to water, beach, lake, spending time with, going to see family, going to see friends. Honestly, trying to get outside of the realm of strength and conditioning, and just, I enjoy most things other people, movies and, you know, you know, dinner, you know what I mean? Like, I'm butchering this. You didn't let me prepare for this.
That's perfect. That's why this one's in there.
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, so next one I got, what if you weren't coaching, what do you think you might be doing as a profession if coaching was kind of off the table for you?
Ooh, I've actually thought about this. Maybe engineering. I think, we reverse engineer as strength and conditioning practitioners. I've always, I used to build all kind of crazy stuff with Legos and everything growing up. Um, Maybe a lawyer. And I think I'm putting myself on a pedestal here that I would be able to actually, complete either of those degrees. But I've always, asked my wife, I like to argue as well. So, if I was able to complete the degrees, one of those two.
Okay. Hey, so if you're setting up an ideal training day for yourself, whether it's in the weight room or out and you're running a couple miles, like you could pick whichever one. What's playing through your headphones and what is your favorite post-training meal?
Ooh, man. Um, Playing through my headphones. Let's say that I just got to get it done. Probably old school Lincoln Park. That was my jam back in high school football. Hybrid theory. Stuff that would really just bring back emotion and memories from being younger and some of the um, athletic related struggles and triumphs that I had when I was younger. Bringing back some old emotion, right? And then as far as food or a meal post workout, well, that's kind of loaded because there's only so many things you can tolerate post workout. Probably the best burger and fries there is.
You got a
Milkshake,
spot?
milkshake too.
You got a
Milkshake too.
spot?
Man, there was a couple really good ones in Chattanooga. Um, there was a couple that shut down in Blacksburg due to COVID. I don't just, I mean, Five Guys is always good, but there's better than that too. No
You
knock on
gotta
Five Guys.
you gotta keep exploring because I'll need a good answer if I'm up your way. Hey, last one I got for you for overtime, and I'm gonna preface this by you can either pick the short version or the long version.
I
Which
think people
question?
are going to want the short version.
You sure? All right. Hey,
I'll see.
all right, so for you, like describe what strength and conditioning kind of means to you in either one word or one phrase.
Ooh, um, development. It's been a conduit for me to develop as an individual, as a professional, as a person. Um, it's for the past, well, if you include like as a student athlete, for the 25 years of my life, it has been something that I've struggled through. It's always been around, and it's always been there through everything I've been through, and um, so yeah, I would say development.
I like it. I mean, yeah, it's been a big part of your life and I mean, there's been a lot of different stages and development that's kind of gone forward, like from your time playing into your time coaching and like your time like working through and climbing the ladder to be in a director position as well. Like there's a lot of cool things you've been able to take from that. So, hey, coach, I can't thank you enough for coming on today. I know this was a little bit time in the making, but it was well worth the wait. For anybody that's got any questions for you, want to kind of reach out, kind of pick your brain a little bit, or maybe any young coaches that are interested in maybe joining the fellowship in Virginia Tech in the future, where can they kind of get a hold of you or follow along?
Yeah, so I'm on social media, and I know you'll tag me in some of that stuff. Ron D at vt.edu, pretty simple. ROND at vt.edu. Probably hadn't had this plug before, but I'm on Strava as well, which is a running app that you can. It's a community. Look me up on that. Let me see what I am on that. Look me up on that, and then, uh, you know, coach me up. Give me some pointers. I know there's going to be some runners on here. Let's see here what my Strava is. I mean, you can find Ron Dickson, RONDICKSOM. And then lastly, I do want to give like a couple of appreciation shout outs, right? VT is an amazing place to work. sport coaches, additional other support staff members, student athletes. I wouldn't have a job without them, right? The staff, the Olympic strength and conditioning staff, as well as the football staff, the basketball staff, like all the different strength staffs are just amazing, and I learn constantly. Specific shout out to the Olympic staff, and just I'm very lucky and fortunate to have the opportunity to work with them, the staff. Trey North, Lauren Collier, Eric Hale, Seth Dieters, and then we've had a ton of fellows over the last couple of years. It's been great. We got some new rock stars. I can't wait for them to take the next steps after hopefully staying with us for at least 10 months. My wife, my son, I just had a child, so he's almost 11 months now. So I've had a couple less hours of sleep every night for the past 10, 11 months, but wouldn't trade it for the world. For some reason my wife puts up with me, and I appreciate that. And I just have a ton of appreciation for the opportunity to be on this, and everything you've done and sharing this stuff as well. So thank you.
I appreciate you coming on, Coach. It was great to catch up and talk, and definitely a humble guy and a wealth of knowledge. So it's been awesome to get you on here finally, and have you join the team, and I know the listeners are going to really like this episode. So I appreciate your time again, and good luck with this upcoming season.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it.
That's it for this episode of The Strength Game. Thank you again to this week's guest and to our sponsors. Be sure to connect and keep up with our guests at the links in the description below. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider to stay up to date on all future episodes. Also, check us out on YouTube and CoachO'Brien.com, where you can find all the video versions of these episodes, as well as show notes, episode schedule, and much more. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of The Strength Game.